All right, we're jumping back on the social club. Today we're switching things up a little bit. We have we put the band back together. We got Cam and Paul back on board, guys. Thanks for coming back on.
Absolutely.
So good to be back.
Good to see you guys. And we're gonna start out with a good one, I think, as requested by Paul. Paul was very interested in this one, so we're gonna discuss the robbery of Accardo's house.
Great story. We have to talk about it for a long time.
So should we go in and explain? You know, I'm sure everybody already knows Tony Accardo, but who wants to give like a little background on who Accardo was and who a little bit of his background, I guess.
Tony Accardo started out as a tough guy with the Circus Cafe gang in the 1920s. And his boss, Claude Maddox, was connected, of course, with Al Capone. And through that, Accardo started sitting in at the hotel, keeping an eye on Capone. He would have a Tommy gun in his lap covered with the Chicago Daily News or the Sun or the Chicago Daily or whatever newspaper it was. And he'd sit in the lobby and he got Capone's attention. He rose through the Capone organization with his friend Paul the Waiter Rica, who would be a lifelong friend, eventually rising to the top of the Chicago outfit, really being the top gangster in the entire country from about 1943 till his death in 1993, never having been sent to jail or prison on a conviction of a crime.
Now that's got to say something for a boss.
It's not only a boss, but the boss.
Yeah.
This guy had the final say on serious outfit business from Chicago west all the way to the Pacific Ocean. This guy was the ultimate authority, and somehow he managed, despite a lot of efforts to put him in jail, even in one conviction, which was overturned, to stay out of jail and prison. It's phenomenal. This is a guy whose power reached to the White House all the way down to the State House.
What do you think he had that he was able to do that? Was it just sheer brilliance, or
I think he had criminal guile. I think he knew he was smart enough to get his underlings to do what he needed. I think he had political control. I think that it says not just as much about his criminal acumen and how smart he was in the underworld. I think it says a great deal about the amount of political power. And as Paul said, reaching up to the White House, I mean, there was so much official power that he had, so much legitimate power that he had, that it would have been almost impossible, next to impossible, for somebody like Accardo to be arrested and tried in Chicago at the state level. I don't see how such a thing could have happened. The only way would be the feds, and at that time there was just no way to really get Accardo on a federal offense besides income tax, and he was really way too wily and way too smart to let such a thing happen. And as Paul said, they did get him, and he had it overthrown. So it was just way too sharp.
And aside from this house, which we'll get to, because obviously he didn't have it the entire time. So before the house and that whole period of time, he wasn't he wasn't flashy like me. You think that's part of it too? He wasn't like a Sam Giancana where he's, very flashy and very out there. And, like I think like a lot of the other true Chicago guys, they're very quiet, very nondescript. You could be standing next to him, grabbing a sandwich, and have no idea who they are.
He drove Oldsmobiles. He did not date starlets. He did not spend the evenings out on the town unless he was gambling at the Owl Club, Calumet City, which he was one of the owners.
Mm-hmm.
He was not flashy, just like you said, Joey, with the exception of a period of time where he lived in a palatial mansion in River Forest.
Yeah.
And that went against his own advice to his men, which was always keep your head down.
And when you say palatial, what it was, 24,000 square feet. I mean,
it's massive. I mean, it's massive.
Enormous house.
Yeah.
22 rooms, 2 bowling alleys, an indoor swimming pool, a pipe organ, black onyx bathtub with 24 karat gold fixtures.
Yeah. Imported Italian marble throughout. I mean, when you see the house, the everything in the house is hand carved on the exterior. It's just incredible.
So at some point he went against what he thought his whole life. He went like extravagant.
And which that led to his indictment for income tax evasion. And when he stepped out of the limelight and to concentrate on that, he also gave up that house.
I think
He
that's
built one that's almost as big, but from the outside, it just looked like a regular ranch house.
Mm-hmm.
so interesting. I mean, I was talking to another friend of mine, and we were talking about that, like the bosses, the money, like all the money keeps getting kicked in and kicked in and kicked in, and they're compiling, these mounds of cash. And we always said, like, there's no money going out. So where's this money going? Like, obviously he dumped a lot of money into these houses.
Well, for sure. And when the federal government raided that particular house, they found $600,000 in cash or something, some outrageous number of cash to be sitting in your house. And that was pocket change for this
More
guy.
than I've got around.
Yeah.
Is it? It might have just been a slow week.
Yeah, maybe it's a slow week. Don't worry, sell another book, Cam.
Checking the couch cushions.
What was his notoriously his cover? Like everybody has a cover, they had
He was a
businesses.
beer
I got a
salesman.
concrete business or whatever. What was his supposed cover?
He was a beer salesman.
A beer salesman.
He was a beer salesman. He was a liquor distributor. He was listed as a beer salesman, right, Paul? I mean, he was just a beer salesman.
That's the way he got indicted, is he deducted the cost of his red Mercedes SL sports car as a business expense. And the IRS said, wait a minute, Tony Accardo doesn't sell beer. And he had all kinds of people come in and testify, oh yeah, I sell beer. But the jury didn't believe him. And he was actually convicted of income tax evasion. But as often the case is in Chicago, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals reversed his conviction on the grounds of prejudicial pretrial publicity.
That was the late 50s, right, Paul? Because
that was about 61.
61, so that would have been a 190 SL, because I don't think he had a 300. Right,
okay.
So that would have been a 190. He may have had a 300, but that would have been significantly more expensive, which he could have afforded. But I think he had a 190 SL, for those of you who were curious about cars. I believe Ricardo had a 190 SL.
Isn't that crazy though? Isn't that how they usually get most of the guys? They can't catch them legitimately, so the IRS gets them.
Yeah, you betcha, because it was always thought that you didn't have to pay taxes on the proceeds of crimes. And Al Capone became famously one of the second or third guys to fall awry of that misconception. And then Nitti, right after Capone, they were both convicted in 31 of income tax evasion for not reporting their illegal gains.
I have a funny story. So a relative of my father's got caught up in a blackmail scheme. He was a brother paid him to find a hitman to kill his brother. And this person my father knew, I don't have to go into. So he ended up blackmailing one brother, saying, I'm going to tell you. Well, the two brothers ended up making up, and they relayed the story to one another. So they turned him into the police. My father said, look, I can't do anything about the charges, but the IRS is going to come after you. He paid income tax on blackmail income.
How did you put that on your 1040?
He blackmail income.
Are you serious?
My father worked as a forensic. He did forensic accounting for a lot of people's taxes. It was listed as blackmail income. The IRS doesn't go through the police. They didn't care.
Right, so then he got away with it?
He got away with the tax portion of it. He did a couple months on the blackmail charge, but the IRS didn't get him.
I mean, why didn't El Chapo do
that? What's that?
Why didn't El Chapo do that?
I don't know.
Just pay taxes on your $600 million of cocaine.
He probably wouldn't have even noticed, right? And this still works. That was one of the things they got Sam Carlisi and Jim Marcello on too, was income tax evasion.
Income tax.
Yeah.
So it's family secrets. We, of course, because we were family, we were part of it and everything, we get front row seats. So there's all these guys sitting in front of us, and they're all sitting there, and I'm talking to the lady next to me, one of the handlers, And I'm like, who's this guy with the notepad? He's got like this legal pad, you know, and he's writing fucking as fast as he can. I'm like, who's this guy? She goes, oh, that's the IRS. I go, oh, these guys are all fucked, because they're all mentioning, you know, this restaurant and that bar and this, and he's writing everything down as fast as he can.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, oh man, these guys are in for a bad day.
Oh, that's the hook that has worked from Capone through Carlisi and on into the future. And you what doesn't matter how you get your money, you have to pay taxes. Even if you buy cocaine, you know, and you want to send it through the mail, you got to buy federal tax stamps. And of course, the minute you buy those, you get busted.
Right, you get busted.
What are you going to do?
But the IRS won't bust you as long as you pay your taxes.
That's
Correct.
right. That's right. Things
All right,
may have changed. That was in the early 80s, but blackmail income.
That is a great story.
So eventually Capone. So eventually Accardo goes into and he builds this palatial mansion, and a group of people or a person comes along at some point and thinks it's a good idea to put a group together to rob Accardo's house.
Well, the robbery actually took place at a different house. So the mansion had been sold by this time. The mansion at Franklin, I won't mention the street address because obviously people are still there.
Yeah.
But that had been sold. He built a house on Ashland, just a couple of blocks away, nearly the same size, nearly the same opulence inside. We have pictures of, just to show you the size of the conference table in the basement. Any Fortune 500 company could fit their entire board around the table that was in the basement of this house.
Imagine dinners at that table.
Oh, I've got some photographs of those. There are people at every spot, and the whole table is 2 levels, and the top level is a lazy Susan. So you can spin the whole thing around.
That's awesome.
It's amazing. But custom built, obviously, right into the, and of course, good things did not happen to the man who built that house either.
Do you think all those guys that were involved in building and all the custom, you know, tile work and everything, you think all those guys got paid?
I have a feeling that they either got paid or got killed.
Yeah.
You know, the architect that designed it, he got murdered not long after it because probably because Accardo was afraid they'd share the blueprints with the FBI.
Right.
So, you know, if he had called me and said, hey, would you mind doing a plumbing job for me? It'd be pretty tempting to be busy. You know, I'm sorry.
Like, yeah, I'd love to, but sorry, I'm out of the country for the rest of my life.
Yeah, right.
Right. In South America forever.
Sorry.
Yeah. But
okay, so this is at the new house that a group of people decide to get together and they're going to rob. They think it's a good idea to rob Accardo.
Well, there's certainly much more happened to encourage what seems like the worst possible idea I could think of, other than maybe make a bald joke about his wife. You know, that's not a good thing either.
That'll get you smacked.
That's right. But Accardo, what happened next is Accardo was very close friends with a jeweler by the name of Harold Levinson. And you guys are both old enough to remember Levinson Jewelers on WGN all the time. I'm Harry Levinson. And he had a big jewelry store right there in the Jewelers Mall down there, Wabash, I think. And Johnny Mendel, who was one of the kings of second story men in the 60s and the 70s, put together a crew and decided to break into Levinson's Jewelers. And they did it over a long weekend, parked a van next to it, cut a hole in the ceiling, cut a hole in the wall, and cleaned the place out. Jewels, furs, well over $1 million. And that's a lot in those days.
And this is back at what period of time is this? Is this in the 70s?
1974, 75?
Okay.
Mid-70s.
Yeah.
$1 million. That's a good amount of change back then.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And Levinson shows up for work and finds a hole in the wall, which was also the modus operandi of another famous gang of outfit burglars.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Out in Vegas, yeah.
Yeah. And goes immediately to see his dear friend, Tony Accardo. And that's where things get really interesting. You know, in the first question that comes to my mind, and we'll talk about it later, is why is this prominent Chicago jeweler good friends with the most powerful mafia boss in the world?
Sure.
I mean, do you guys go to the same church, or, you know, I mean, how does that happen?
I mean, he had to buy an engagement ring or something, right? I don't know.
I'm sure that was it.
Maybe from his commercials on TV.
He
Saw the commercial. He said, "That's where I got to go."
He's watching the Cubs one afternoon, and he says, "Hey, I'm going to see this Harry Levinson." Somehow,
Right?
I don't think Accardo paid retail for anything.
I don't. Yeah. I don't,
What do you think, Camillus? Do you think he paid retail for his?
I think he probably got a discount or two. I think he was probably got a couple discounts, and that was in the days before the frequent shopper cards. But yeah, I think they probably gave him the house discount. What I've always wondered is with this job, you've got a town like Chicago where everything is wrapped up tight as a drum by these guys, and you've got a famous jeweler like Levinson, and you've got some guys that go in there and rob him. You know, I think we're going to go on this later, but it's in an outfit town. It's kind of a strange supposition to think that guys would go into a job unsanctioned.
I agree, Camillus. How could you try and pull off $1 million jewelry theft in the heart of the loop, in a town where the mafia owns the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, owns the Cook County Sheriff's Office, owns the Chicago Police Department,
employs every burglar in the city, and they all talk. The underworld's a small place.
You bet. And they're all on streets and sand, you know, and they, all those guys, they own all the judges, the probation officers, the bail bondsmans, back when we had those. And how in the world did they think they could get away with this unsanctioned?
Unless
let's go into theory on it before we start breaking down who these people were and everything. What are some theories you guys have?
Well, in my mind, here's what I think happened. Back in the 90s, when I was working the Carlisi trial, one of the things Lenny Patrick would do, and Lenny Patrick would have known Harold Levinson because Patrick was the top Jewish gangster in the city. And of course, Harold Levinson was Jewish. And any connection that Levinson had to Accardo would have had to have gone through Patrick. That's the way it was done.
Mm-hmm.
What Lenny Patrick would do is he would pick out people he claimed to be friends, like a Nissan dealer was one of them. You would recognize the names if I told you of these fairly large businesses and restaurants. Lenny Patrick would send his own crew into these restaurants, into the owner's office, and say, "Hey, you got to pay street tax. I need 500,000 by Tuesday. I'm going to break your legs and burn down your house." And of course, Lenny Patrick would just happen to stop by. And the poor business owner would say, Lenny, you got to help me. What can you do? Oh, don't you worry about it. We're friends. Let me take care of this for you. I'll talk to the right people. Mm-hmm. Lenny would go, he would leave, go do whatever he does for a couple of days and come back and say, look, these are serious guys. The best thing I can do for you is knock it down to 375,000. And I got to have it by Saturday. Otherwise, they mean business. I'm sorry. I did the best that I could. Mm-hmm. So the business owner thinks, oh my God, my buddy Lenny, he saved me 125 grand. What a great guy. And then Lenny would pocket the money, pay off his crew, and then kick up to the boys out west. And that's what I think really happened with Levinson.
Now, our supposition, though, is what if, say, Lenny took the money and didn't kick to his crew?
Well, they'd be very unhappy. Right.
So let's say Accardo and Levinson are good buddies. They're good enough that Accardo knows he's got $1 million worth of diamonds in his place. So somebody sanctions a jewelry heist. And they go in there, they rob these jewels, they deliver them. And Accardo says, look, I can get you back half of it, but my guys say most of it's already gone already. So he talks to the guys. He's like, all right, we're going to give him back part of it. You guys are going to get yours. But they don't get theirs because the Italians figure, I'm not paying some street level burglars. They're fine. They got plenty of other work. We'll let them do another job or whatever. So the Italians basically robbed the street guys who they put up to do the job in the first place.
So what you're saying, Camillus, is they must have gotten Accardo's okay to do this
Correct.
in advance.
Correct. I think these guys, this job was sanctioned from the beginning, and then it sort of backfired on the robbers. They were ripped off by the mob who had originally sanctioned the job, and that is what gave them the impetus and basically the balls to go in there and do something crazy like rob the mob boss's house. That's what pushed them over the edge to where they went in there and robbed the mob boss.
So what type of crew are we talking? How many guys are we talking that were involved in Accardo's house?
So there were maybe 7 guys. There was maybe it was 6 guys.
6 guys, but there's going to be one more body.
Yeah, there was an extra body.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That poor guy.
Oh boy. But I think Camillus is absolutely right. I think this was a sanctioned job, and the mob screwed the burglars. They weren't made men. These burglars were connected. They were paying street tax to operate, but they weren't made men.
Right. So let's break down who a couple of these guys are. We'll cover a couple guys for this episode, and then we'll dig into the rest on the next episode.
Well, Johnny Mendel, he was with Peanuts Pansko and Paul Pansko, one of the top rated second story men in the city, very well known burglar, very successful. What they would do is they'd go into the second story of an establishment, bypass the alarm system, even very sophisticated alarm systems. He knew exactly what, he had the right guys with him. This was what he did. He would break into commercial places, a lot of homes on the Gold Coast, Oak Street and that area up there, residential burglaries. And now, of course, we know that they were doing it in cooperation with Harnhart and the Chicago Police Department.
With Bill Hanhart.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, which nobody knew this at the time, but that's what Hanhart was doing. He was taking a piece of all this.
Yeah.
We've heard some very
and offering protection.
Protection.
Yeah, and helping them out.
So these guys are getting squeezed from both sides. Law enforcement's taking a piece of it. The outfit's taking a piece of it. It's tough, but he would have been the leader of this group.
So you're saying Johnny Mendel would have been the leader?
I think so. What do you think, Camillus?
I think Mendel with his grooming, his background. I mean, he certainly his name is certainly attached to it the most, and I think that he was the first. He seemed to be the first person they kind of hunted down. They brought Accardo in from the West Coast because he knew all the burglars. He would have been the guy who just sort of identified these guys. At least that's what's said to have happened. And Mendel was the guy with the most experience. He was really, having worked with Pansko's group, and that was sort of like the minor leagues. That was the preeminent robbery crew in Chicago. A lot of guys got their start with the Pansko brothers.
So who's under Johnny Mendel? Who else does he bring in? He says, "Okay, I'm going to put this together, and we're going to rob this place. I'm going to grab these guys."
That's Buddy Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
He was the second in command, and later turns out to be the second one to go down. When we talk about that in another episode, which was quite interesting. And then you had Steve Garcia, Ryan's right-hand man. So it went in the appropriate authority, order of authority, right?
So what's Buddy Ryan's background? Give our listeners a little background on Buddy Ryan.
He was a convicted burglar. He was jewels were his kind of thing. Would have been present for the jewelry store robbery, and he had, like a lot of these guys, he had gone down for burglary in the past. So he was a career burglar.
Okay. And then he's going to bring his buddy Steve Garcia in.
Yeah, he is. And then after that, we got Moretti and Reno. And that's the very famous Strangers in the Night murder, which makes its way into Casino in a way, because the murder of the who's the guy that they kill in Casino? They chase him around the swimming pool in slow motion, and it's actually Frank Collada that's playing the shooter.
Oh,
It's the Gus Greenbaum character.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they're chasing him around, and Strangers in the Night is playing. And that comes from a real murder that took place. Two of these guys that were killed in a Cicero bar while that song was playing.
Mm-hmm. So Steve, see his background, he's just another thief. Then you have Moretti, which same thing, is just another.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Moretti and Reno.
Now, Moretti's death is interesting. We'll get into that a little bit later too. It was especially personal with Moretti because his name ended in it.
Yeah, Moretti was an incredibly foolish man. He used to be a Chicago police officer.
Yeah, he was a cop.
And let's say he flashed some stuff that never should have been flashed around town, which led to the reprieve being as brutal as it was against him.
So that's 4 guys so far. They're all just thieves so far.
Well, except for Mendel was very good, like I said, at bypassing alarms. He was an electronics expert.
But no real like work guys, no guys that are killers. These are all just
No.
thieves.
They're just thieves.
Electronic and robbers.
Yeah.
Yes. And then you got Hertogs and McDonald. And then, of course, unfortunately, one other who was not a member of the crew that committed the burglary of Ricardo's house also wound up dead, right, Camillus?
Yeah, it was Don Reno, wasn't
it? It was
Wait, I'm trying.
Mike Volpe.
Oh yeah, I was thinking of the guy, who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time for the Strangers of the Night. But yeah, poor old Volpe.
Wait, Mike Volpe, you're talking about the housekeeper again.
The housekeeper.
Yes.
That guy didn't do anything but clean the house. They killed him too.
Right.
They killed him too.
Which
That one's
we
interesting. I think that one we should actually save for the very last, because when we were talking about it before, I found it extremely interesting where they found parts of him.
We think that goes to prove. I think that supports our theory a little bit.
It really does. But you know what? The question I have, guys, is this just shows how powerful Accardo was. How could you find, what was it? His glasses and part of his dental plate?
His partial.
Yeah, his partial in Accardo's furnace. And the guy walks.
Right, and that's the old time wood burning furnace.
Yeah.
How? How can this happen? I mean, your houseman disappears. 6 men are murdered who were connected with burglarizing your house. 6 people. And then 2 of the hitters are killed. So now we've got 8. And then the houseman falls. That's 9 people murdered, all connected to Tony Accardo. And he was never even charged.
Well, they were murdered. Were their bodies?
Right.
Yeah, some of them were, right? Some of them were found.
Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah, they were all found. They were supposed to be found. They were
So
there were
we-
supposed to be more guys. Yeah, except for Volpe. They were supposed to be killing more guys.
You said Moretti was at Chicago PD. Then you had Hertogs and McDonald's. Those are same. Those are just heist guys.
Yep.
Mhm.
As far
Same
as I
thing with
know.
Reno.
Yep. But what you got is, you had 2 of these button men who were also killed, so that there's no way that it could be traced back. And then later during Family Secrets, we have testimony that, now wait a minute, it wasn't them at all. It was Nick and Frank.
Frank Sr. Yeah.
Frank
Senior. Yeah. So
Both
was
of those guys have been drivers for I think Borsellino and what was the other guy's name?
Carusiello.
Cruciello, Gerald Cruciello.
Yeah,
So
he
walk
was
me
driver.
through walk me through what you guys know about the night that they burglarize Accardo's house. So all of these guys, they, for whatever reason, they all get together. Do we know why they decided, or does anybody have any idea of why they just got cut out of something and they were mad, or
Anybody who would have known is dead.
yeah,
Anybody who would have even killed anybody who would have known.
pretty much.
Yeah, I think that, as Paul and I have said, I think that they got cut out of something
Yeah.
that they were initially told they were going to be a part of. That's what pushed them over the edge. I don't think that they just were bitter about having to return a job. And it doesn't make sense that the mob just said, oh, well, you got to give all that back. We're loyal to Levinson. That doesn't make sense. I don't care how good a friend Accardo is. He's not going to give everything back to a jeweler.
Right.
$1 million.
Right. Which is insured, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yes. But what else is interesting is two other points we'll have to talk about. And one is how arrogant must Accardo have been and how confident in his power that he had $1 million in stolen jewels and furs brought to his house.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Mm-hmm.
What in the world was he thinking?
Not just your house, your mansion.
Yeah.
That you just built again.
Right in River Forest, right on
Yeah.
Ashland.
Because he wasn't even there. He was out in Palm Springs.
Yeah, but
Right.
that just goes to show the power that they had in the 70s was ultimate power. I mean, that was the peak of power.
And that's, we need to talk about that. And then another thing we need to talk about that gets missed a lot is Gerald Carusiello was not just a mob button man that was dispensable. He was Joey Aiupa's personal bodyguard.
Yeah.
And Joey Aiupa at the time, everybody's thinking, well, that he's the boss. But Accardo snaps his fingers and his bodyguard and driver is gone. Just like that. That says something about the dynamic.
Borsellino drove for him too at one time, according to one or two sources that I've read. I know that there were a lot of things about Borsellino, but I've read there were connections between he and Aiupa too. So those are two guys that had ties to Aiupa. One of them, as you said, is bodyguard. And
Well, yeah,
both
and
of them-
Borsellino was a member of the Wild Bunch, and they were all Cicero guys.
Mhm.
So they were all
both of them
Aiupa guys.
distinguished.
Yeah, they were both Aiupa guys, no question about it.
So you got
Nope.
Accardo out in Palm Springs when all of this happens. How long does it take for him to find out?
He
Oh, right away.
immediately.
How?
It was,
How did he
it was
find out
Volpe
immediately?
that called him,
Volpe
right?
called him.
So his house,
The houseman-
I don't want to call him his houseboy because it sounds like
He was, in his 70s. His houseman called him.
his caretaker, his house taker. I don't know.
75 years old.
Yeah. And
So
then
he calls him
also
right away
called-
and says, "Hey, these guys bust in. They took all your shit."
he called him, but he also called the police.
Right. And he was called to testify before a grand jury investigating what had happened.
Well, that's why Accardo got rid of him.
Yeah, but
He's a loose shit.
wow. How
The
in the
police-
world, though? Think about what happened here, Joey. This guy's dentures are found in Accardo's furnace.
Yeah.
How does he allow it to become so close to him? $1 million in jewels in his house, a dead body, the remains of a dead body in his house, but he stayed in power for all these years. How does that make sense to you guys?
Power. I mean, it's power. He had the city, as you said. I mean, you described it when we first started talking, the immense power that he had, that he was able to wield.
I mean, his dentures could have ended up in anybody, and that could happen in plenty of normal ways.
Right. And they could say that, be like, that doesn't mean that he's dead. Maybe they fell out when he was throwing wood in there to keep the house
maybe
warm.
he sneezed, right?
Right.
I mean, who knows? So then at that point, okay, he calls the police. Accardo knows. Accardo's coming home. He's pissed off. When does the first murder happen?
Very soon, but not for a few weeks. I mean,
Yeah.
there was a period of time.
They had to do a little bit of
Okay.
research.
So, the first guy didn't disappear till January 15th. And then once that started, the burglary was a little before Christmas, right?
And
Cameron?
what's Volpe
Yeah.
say? He's like, I didn't see anybody, but I know people did it. I mean, what's his story? He says he didn't see anybody, so the cops are like, they don't even know who to look for.
I
I
don't
just
know
think-
what he told the grand jury.
I think that the general question was, why did he call the cops at all?
Right. Well,
I
that
mean, why in the hell? I think that's what they were asking themselves is why in the hell did this guy call the police at all? Because immediately the police would then be invited into Accardo's home to look around.
right.
It's not like they're going to wait
Now, it's a
outside
crime
the
scene.
yard and be like, you got to, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They have full access, which I'm sure that went through Cardo's head. Like, why the fuck is that the second person you would call?
Right. Right. So in a way, the burglars did him a huge favor. You know, they cleared out all the evidence.
Yeah.
But how Accardo danced around this without even the suggestion that there might be an indictment, I can't fathom it. I mean, there's power, and then there's obscene power.
Right. That's like government power.
Well,
Government power.
Yeah.
at the same time, he was so old. I mean, I think that there would have been no suggestion that he himself could have committed these murders. He was
Well, of course not. He was out of town.
But this was also, you figure RICO was passed in 1970, but it wasn't even used until what, 78 or 79, and that was in New York. So really, I mean, what could they have? I mean, he clearly didn't commit the murders.
No.
And he was out of the state, and if they weren't going to get him on RICO, which nobody was even using at the time, it would be hard to think of anything in this. I mean, trying to order a murder. I mean, you'd have to prove money had changed hands, and certainly no one was going to speak. So,
well, and do you think one of those two are like, yeah, they stole the, $800,000 in diamonds and another couple $100,000 in fur coats?
What I think is
that I just happen to have sitting in my basement.
Yeah, I don't know how it got it. It just fell off a truck.
Right.
There is one other party to this robbery that we haven't discussed yet, and it's Siegel. There was one other robber who did not take part in this, but he was a well-known burglar
Bobby the Beak.
Bobby the Beak. And he was a big guy too, Bobby the Beak. And he was so scared because all the other burglars in town were disappearing and turning up within a day or two of disappearing. He went to his lawyer. He took a lie detector test.
Yeah.
Said he had no part in this. And he had his lawyer deliver it to Cardo's or some other mob lawyer. And he was told later by Scarpelli, Jerry Scarpelli, he's like, well, it's a good thing you did that because you were supposed to be the Jew that we got. They wanted to get, Scarpelli said they wanted one of every ethnicity. And Siegel was supposed to be the Jewish second story man that they got.
So in our last 15 minutes here, 20 minutes, let's go into first murder, Johnny Mendel. You said he's the first guy to go.
Yeah, well, and rightfully so. You know why? Because he was the leader. He was the top electronics guy in the whole outfit. I mean, he was a respected enough guy. And this was, now the robbery was Christmas Eve, right? Mm-hmm. So there was an extra bit of time for there to break in. January 15th. So you're talking about 3 weeks had passed. Bobby Mendel disappears.
Yeah.
Just disappears off the face of the earth.
Oh, did you say Bobby?
I'm sorry.
I was calling him Johnny.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
John.
Yeah, Johnny
right.
Mendel.
It was Johnny Mendel.
Okay.
He disappears on January 15th. So people start to wonder about this right away because like Camilla said earlier, the outfit and their associates is it's like a small town. There's 1,500 to 3,000 guys.
Mm-hmm.
They start talking about, this is weird. What's going on? And Mendel, several weeks later, of course, and this is a story you hear again and again and again and again, somebody noticed a car parked alongside of the road that had a bad odor coming from it. In the trunk was Johnny Mendel, stabbed and strangled to death. But he wasn't even found until the murder parade started.
Right. He was
5 days later,
but was found after.
Right. So what you got is Christmas is the burglary.
Mhm.
January 15th, Mendel disappears. 5 days later, Buddy Ryan is
Right.
actually, he didn't disappear, but they found him dead, 4 bullet holes in the back of his head
In his car.
in his car.
Yeah.
So then you go a couple more days, February 2nd, Garcia winds up at the Sheridan next to the O'Hare.
Yeah, at the O'Hare. Hilton.
Trunk music.
Yeah. Ice picked
Oh.
and throat slit.
Yeah.
So they're not knocking him down pretty good.
And this is about the time that Bobby Beagle says, "Oh shit."
Yeah.
And all the burglars in Chicago are heading out.
Yeah, they left town.
They're leaving. And Beagle, Siegel was a big name. And just like Camilla said, he saved his own life by doing what he did. But it just continued and it got worse. Then it's only 2 more days till Vincent Moretti shows up.
That's February 4th, right?
And Renault, a friend of his, okay, small time crook, like Camilla's pointed out, they're in a Cicero bar, and they're beaten to death with hands and feet.
Kind of like what was that from that was Goodfellas, wasn't it? Where they stomped the
Yeah.
guy in the
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
That's the same thing. They stomped this guy in a bar.
They stomped him in a bar, and that's the reference to the Strangers in the Night,
Yeah.
because Johnny Mathis's version of that song was playing on the jukebox while they killed him.
So you got 4 people tied to that crew that have been dissolved at that point in time.
Yeah.
The police are quiet. They're going crazy.
Yeah. What in the world? They're fleeing everywhere. But Moretti was an idiot. And he was wearing Tony Accardo's monogrammed gold cufflinks.
Mhm. He was also, in being Italian, was also a bit. I mean, the cufflinks and being Italian himself, there was a lot of feeling that he should have known better. And then he's wearing those cufflinks on top. I mean, the cufflinks was really bad. But,
I mean, is that something you would have done?
I mean,
I mean, you really got to think about it. Like, some of these guys are like brilliant with electronics and being able to crack safes and shit. And on the other hand, they're stupid as shit.
mhm.
Like, why on earth would you think of doing that and not think that sooner or later that's going to get you in a spot?
Just think of where we would be if every criminal was as smart as Tony Accardo. And they certainly weren't.
Yeah.
Paul Rica, Tony Accardo, Meyer Lansky, and a handful of very small, Carlo Gambino, small handful, Gus Alex, Murray Humphreys were so smart that they were almost uncatchable. But Moretti did not suffer from that problem.
No, and I think when we say he was beaten to death with him, I mean that's sort of right. I mean, there was a guy, Frank Gumba Saladino. He was a made guy. He was initially from the Rockford family, and he got tied in with 26th Street Chinatown crew. And he was a 350 pounds, huge guy. He was supposed to be tried in family secrets, and he died in a hotel room before the trial.
Mhm. I remember that.
Natural causes.
Yeah.
He was a huge guy. So they grab Moretti when he walks in. They get him around the neck. They're choking him, and Gumba Saladino is jumping up and down on his rib cage while they're choking him to death. So it wasn't just like they stomped him and beat him. I mean, they crushed his lungs.
Yeah.
While choking. I mean, he was really, really vicious what they did to Moretti.
Did
So
they
it
take
really
his
was a
couplings back?
Can you imagine what would happen to you if you showed up at Accardo's doorstep with the cufflinks you just took off a murder victim?
I mean, clean them up and hand them back. Here you go.
Ah, boy, I don't
Remember
think
me at Christmas time.
You want to take care of that message. I don't think I want to deliver it. I want to forget I ever saw it.
Yeah.
I never would speak of it.
So he got special attention because of the cufflinks and because he was ex-Chicago PD, you think?
And
Just
think
because of the
he-
cufflinks, because he was so just dumb.
He was Italian and he was flashing Accardo's personal property around town.
Mhm.
I mean, how stupid can you be? And this is, by this time, we're talking a month after Mendel disappeared. So
Yeah.
they knew what was going on.
Yeah, and at that point, why wouldn't you? I mean, you would think that he would jump town.
You would think so. You would think so, but he didn't. And his buddy that was with him had nothing to do with it. He was just in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, we've heard that before.
Yeah, it's not the first time. What's funny about Gumbo
I hear that.
Saladino? A friend of mine found out he was adopted, and he did that 23andMe,
Yeah.
and he found out his real name is Saladino, and Gumbo was his uncle.
No shit.
Yeah. Yeah. So he reached out and said, "Hey, do you know anything about a guy by this name?" And I said, "As a matter of fact."
Let me tell you a story.
Let me tell you a story. Yeah. So he even looks like him. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is
Yeah.
interesting. I've heard a lot of
Mhm.
controversial stuff about that. Or then you get people that do it and they find out they're not related to who they thought they were related to, and
Yeah. Do we tell dad?
yeah,
You know,
crazy.
those kind of
Yeah,
stories.
crazy stuff. Or your dad, is really your uncle, or your
Right.
uncle, they switched or something. Like, oops, let's just not talk about that right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what a horrible burden to have to carry, all because you did something for ancestry.com.
So I would love to hear the conversation. You got police are called about the robbery, and then you have these guys within weeks of time, just one right after the others getting knocked down. Would love to hear the conversations of police and other people that were in Accardo's pocket. The conversations back and forth of like, Tony, come on, what the fuck? What's going on here? I mean, there had to be some kind of interaction there and conversation of like, hey,
How worried do you think these cops are that a bunch of like the best burglars, some of the best burglars in the country? Because I mean, these weren't guys that just were robbing around Chicago. I mean, these were guys that were known nationally, because you go all over the country for jobs. You go where the work is and where you hear about there's good jobs. So I mean, these burglary crews were going all over the place, and likewise with New York and different crews all over Kansas. I mean, they all had crews that would go different places, and because you don't always want to shit where you eat, so they go all over the place. And so I don't know how worried these guys were about, a whole bunch of career burglars were dying. I think that they noticed a pattern pretty quickly, but I wonder how worried about it the police were.
Yeah. Yeah, I
You know,
wonder.
you have to worry, and it's a great question because the media was going crazy.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine the media attention all over this too?
Yeah, yeah. And wouldn't you like to have found out the chain of command here? Does Accardo call Jack Cerrone and say, "I want you to talk to Willie Massino"? And how does it get to Ayupa? Because I'm guaranteeing you, Accardo's not passing it, even to his good friend Joey Ayupa. He's not passing those instructions.
How does it get to Frank and Nick? At that point, I mean, does Accardo just pick up the phone and say, "Hey"?
No, I don't believe it does. There's a chain of command,
Right?
Where it would go from
Yeah.
Accardo to Cerrone. Cerrone would tell Massino. Massino would tell La Pietra, who would tell
Right.
Joey
We'd call
Lombardo.
Angelo in, and then Angelo would call in and say, "Hey, I got something for you guys to do."
Well, I think it would even go beyond that. I think it would probably beyond that, then go to Joey Lombardo.
Wait, how? Why? Why would Joey get involved?
Well, Joey is
He was a street boss.
street boss right now.
Yeah.
Oh,
He would have been in like 1970. This was in 77 or 78. All right. So
Yeah.
Pendorf, they were still out in the, okay. So yeah.
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So, yeah, they were still out. Yeah, that's right. That was 84, I think. But yeah, so he was still, yeah.
So they would take it to Lump, and then Lump would take it to Angelo. You're saying?
I'm
He
thinking
was a
that,
street boss.
I think that Angelo and Joey were pretty much on the same level
Mm-hmm.
at this point. Turk Torello is in there somewhere because he may have been still alive. He died in 79, right?
78.
78. So maybe he's still alive at this point, but very ill.
Yeah.
So I think it goes to Lumbo, and from there, maybe right to the Wild Bunch. I don't know. I mean, those are Iupa's guys.
Well, from my understanding, it was only Senior and Nick that took care of everything, took care of all these guys.
Yeah. Which doesn't explain the deaths of Borsellino and Carusiello.
You know, Borsellino's death has been described as, you know, that was supposed to be something that Petrocelli had a problem with him. And the stuff I've read about Butchie, he had some kind of an issue going back to a couple jobs or something they had that may or may not have been related to this. And that's not just coming from one source, but I mean, I don't know what was going on with those guys. I know that Borsellino was a little bit lower than Petrocelli, but I don't really know the full story was going on. I've done a lot of reading into Butchie, but he had something to do with that too.
Yeah,
He would have had to, you know, he would have had to do with that murder. Now, Carusiello makes, and the fact that they were both involved, that they were both killed pretty close to one another, really seems kind of, you know, and that they both held similar, you know, they both at one point were involved with Iupa. Yeah, that's him. And the Carusiello was so close to him really does signal something.
Yeah. I don't know. We're going to break that off, and we're going to jump into that on the next show. We'll tie everything out. You guys stay put though. I'm going to stop recording. Don't go anywhere.